One thing that's really important is your ability to troubleshoot, because you're going to get error messages. I want to make sure that you take the time when you get an error message. First, read what it says. If it tells you table or view does not exist, well, that's a hint. Maybe you spelled the table name wrong. If you get invalid field name, it's going to give you a hint as to what's causing the problem. And that should at least guide you. If you're not sure, check your punctuation. Did you use single quotes instead of double quotes? Did you have commas in between the field names? Did you have a select and a from keyword? Things to look for. So this week we're looking at single row functions. So each row of the database, you're going to run some function on either a field or something related to that row. We will be doing aggregate functions for weeks, which is really interesting. There's this interesting table called dual, and the purpose of it is to practice calculations and functions. There's no data in it except for this placeholder field called dummy. There's different kinds of functions. There's character, there's conversion functions, there's substring, concatenation. There's a lot of different functions, and you can go through the exercises in the practice exercises. These case manipulation functions are really useful because if you have names of people or city names and you have no control over how the user entered them, you might have names entered all in lowercase, or they might be entering the data all in uppercase. So Patterson with a capital P and Patterson all uppercase will not be the same, will not match up as the same city. These case manipulation functions, lower, upper, init, cap, will allow you to resolve the differences in the data. Let's go into Apex. First, I want to show you that you can change the number of rows you get as output. So I recommend set it to 50. For the most part, that should be enough, or you could set it, as big as you want. If you had a table that was that big, you wouldn't want to see it all at once. So for now, I'll leave it at 100. You have a history that you can go back and search for commands that you recently ran. You can also save some of your SQL commands. All right, so SQL Workshop, SQL commands. Now I'm going to do it again, change that. When we write our SQL, we want to get in the habit of using uppercase for field names and lowercase for table, or rather uppercase for keywords and lowercase for field names. So select star from, and there's this table called dual, D-U-A-L. Select star from dual, and I click run. There's one field, it's called dummy, and the value X. It's really just a placeholder. This is an opportunity for us to practice with the functions. We don't need data in a table to practice. So first, we talked about how you can concatenate the first name and the last name and use the double bars. Here, I could do with a literal. Okay, so select, oops, hello from dual. Let's see if I get that to work. All right, so that's a literal. Select. So I have select and I have world, hello world. And we learned that we could concatenate using this symbol. So if we wanted to put a space in between, We could have done it this way. Okay. So I have hello, I have concatenate, then I have a literal space. I have the concatenate symbol, and then I have world, and it gives me this kind of ugly title. But here I have hello world. Now we're going to use a function to do the same thing. I'm just saving it. All right, so now what I'm going to do is get rid of this. The concat is the name of the function, and we should put the functions in uppercase. All right, so concat, and put hello, comma, world. We separate the two literals with a comma. We put them in parentheses. For all these functions, the parameters of the function are going to go inside parentheses. Because I'm passing these parameters into the concat function, it's going to run its concatenation thing, and it's going to give us the output. Now I'm going to click run, and here I have hello world. Let's see if it will take a literal in between. I don't know if it will allow 3 arguments, so let's test that. Nope, this only allows 2 arguments. So it's telling me invalid number of arguments. But of course, I could also leave a space like that. That should work too. Okay, so now I have hello world. Now I can change the title so it doesn't, I don't see this here, right? And I'll just call it message. Okay, so here's the message, and it's hello world. So far, so good? All right, easy, right? Nice, that's the concat function. What if I want this message to be all in uppercase? There's a function called upper. Of course, upper does not take 2 arguments.
Can we do upper and concat together?
Yes, you can nest them. Okay, so let me just see if this works. Okay, so here I'm passing to upper the word hello in mixed case, and then it goes into the upper, and the upper does its conversion, and here is the output in uppercase. So far, so good? So Armand, you were asking, can I do both? Give me an example of what you'd like to do. Did you have something specific in mind?
No, the same hello world, but with uppercase.
Okay, so we have hello world. I mean, we could just do it this way. And we'll have hello world. All right, let me try to come up with another example that would be.
Yeah, it's worked. I tried.
Okay, so that's an example of lower, upper, lower just does the opposite. You'll get it in lowercase, and nitcap gives you mixed case. There's also functions that allow you to extract a portion of the field. So concat builds pieces together. Substring takes a small piece out. Length will tell you how long the field is. Okay, so let's change upper to length. Okay, so this time, I don't need the word as message. This time it's telling me that the length is 11. It's giving me a numeric answer because that's what the length does. It tells you how long it is. Okay, substring will allow you to take a portion of the word. You want the second character to the fourth character. Now, each function works differently. Some functions only take one argument, some take two, some take three. In-string will tell you where the pattern is in the word. So if you're looking for the letter A or something like that. The L pad and R pad, that's left padding and right part padding. You can add something to the word to make it fill a certain space. Trim, you can cut down something, you can replace. There are so many functions. Okay, so concat, we looked at concat. Just like we did concat with hello world, we can do the same thing from a file. You can take a field, first name and last name, and it will give you your result combined. So these are just from the hub, some examples. We looked at length. You can take length on a field in a file. Substring. So if I have hello world and I just want from column 1, the first character, the H, and length of 5, notice substring takes 3 arguments. It'll just give me hello. If you just give it 6 characters, it's going to start at the W. Okay, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 is the W, and it'll just give you to the end. You can take the substring, the first letter of the last name, and the first 3 characters. Or maybe you need to create a user ID, and you're limited to 3 characters. This might be something you would use. In string, what if we want to locate the location of the W, the uppercase W, in this pattern? A numeric result to tell you where. It's the 6th position. Here, they're giving an example of last name, in string last name, the letter A, lowercase a. So for these 2 results, it doesn't find the lowercase a in A belt because it's a capital A, it's not a lowercase. But for each one, for Davies' last name, it finds it in position 2. Right? I mean, some of these you're like, well, when would I use this? I don't always have an answer for everything, but there'll be times when you will. And trim, these examples show you how to trim the leading character, the trailing character, definitely to play around with. Now, the numeric functions, those you'll probably use more frequently. All right, rounding. You could round to the nearest integer. You could round, in this case, round takes 2 parameters. What is the field, numeric field that you're looking at to round, and to how many positions? So a positive 2 means 2 decimal places. So we have this 3 decimal rounded to 9.26, rounded to 0.93. Right? If it's a 5 and up, it rounds up. There's also another one called Trunc, which will just chop off the character, doesn't do any rounding. So let's take a look at some examples. Back to Duo. So select 412.12345. Okay. If I run this, here's my value. Now I want to pass this number into the round function. So here's the round. With each function, you must pass them inside the parameters. If I only put the value, the field, and I don't put a number, what position I want, it should round it to the nearest integer. Let's take a look. So here it is. It rounds it to 412. If this was 412 point, let's say 8, now it should round to the 413. So if I run it now it's 413. I can add a second argument. So let's say I want to round it just 2 decimal positions. So if it's 0.823 and so on, it should round down to 0.82. Okay, see? How are we doing? Are we good? Isn't this fun? It gets more exciting when you're dealing with groups. I find the group function section a lot more interesting. This you'll be using in different ways though, so it's good to be comfortable with. What if I want to round the other way? So 412 to the nearest 10, the nearest tens. 410, is it 410 or 420? I can put -2 to go 2 positions to the left, and that should round it to 410. Oh, 400. Okay, so -2, it took me all the way. So it rounded down to 400. Interesting. 1, 2. All right, so let's say if I change it to -1. So again, I want you to play around with it, pass some numbers in and see what you get. So -1 will round it because it's taking me to the tens position, or the ones position, it will round. If I change this to 3, then it's going to round to 8.823. I should get that. Okay, so that works. Now, what if I said instead of, let's make this 5, 6, 7. Let's change that. Okay, so I have 5, 6, 7. When I round to 3 decimal places, I get 0.857. It went up from 856.7 to 87. But if I change this function from round to trunc, this will just chop it off. It will truncate. It doesn't look to see if it's 5 or higher. So now if we run it, it's 856. It doesn't care what the last value is. Okay? You can do arithmetic and a lot of different functions with dates. We're going to type this in. Select sysdate from dual. And I will post this PowerPoint. So type into your Apex, just as you see it here. I don't know if you can see, select sysdate from dual. And you should see the output. You won't see July. You'll see, obviously, today's date, October. Okay, so this is the default format for the date. Let's use the events table, the DJs on demand. So D_events. Let's just do a select star so you can remember what's in there. Remember, select star gives us all the data. So here's select star. You get the ID, the name, the event date, description, cost, etc. We're going to focus on event date. So I'm just going to say, change this to event_date. Right. And then I want to see the sysdate. So I'll see today's date and I'll see the date, the event dates that are stored in there. Okay, so event date and today's date.
So sysdate can be capital or lowercase because it's function.
I should make it uppercase because it's a keyword and I want to stick with keeping uppercase first. But even select, even the select, if you did it in lowercase, it would still work because it's really not case sensitive. But I want to get in the habit because when you're going to hand in your hands-on exam or your labs, I'm going to look for this. So sysdate, comma, event_date. Let's run it again just to make sure I didn't make a mistake. Now, there's all kinds of functions here. You can do months, between. Okay, now, of course, these are past sysdate, comma, event, underscore date. I'm passing in two arguments, the current date and the event date. And I'm going to look, how long ago was this? Let's run that. Okay, months in between. That's not a very nice looking output, right? And I'll change the column so it looks prettier. As single quotes. How long ago was this? All right, so I'll give it a nice title. Now I'll run it again. And I think it's supposed to be in double quotes. Is that correct? Let's try this again. Okay. All right, so I have the current date. I have the event that's from a long time ago. How long ago was this? I want to know how many months ago. So really how. But I don't want the report to show a number that looks like this. So I can take this output and pass it to another function. Right? So the inner function now would become months between. We have this output. What I would do now is I would put this whole expression in another set of parentheses. So we have the inner function, months between. It's going to look at sysdate and event date. Then we put that result, we capture that in a second set of parentheses, and we pass that to the round function. Okay, we're going to round it to the nearest integer. Okay, that looks better, right?
Yeah.
Right? You wouldn't want to hand in a report that looked like that. Okay, so round, if we wanted to, we have the months and event date, I could say, okay, I want to round it to 2 decimal places. Okay?
So Professor, would you do the same thing for upper function and concate? You would just add parentheses?
In other words, if I wanted to pass the concat into the upper function, you could do that. You could do that.
Okay.
All right. The thing is, it goes from inner parentheses out. So you can have you can nest several levels. So here's the function months between. It's going to run based on this, sysdate and event date, and then we're passing these two parameters. One, the result of the function, and the second parameter is 2, telling us how many decimal places.
Can you also use brackets?
No, I don't think so, but let's give it a go. Right? Because it would be nice to differentiate between the parentheses and the brackets, right?
I don't think.
No,
No.
not going to
No.
let you. But I encourage you to ask these questions when you're doing the labs. Run it with. It'll help you remember it, that no, it's not going to work. Sometimes I don't always know the answer. Just run it and see what happens, right? So the SQL doesn't look so pretty, but it certainly makes the report look nice, right? How many months? Okay. You could also make an expression out of this. I'm going to take round out for a second. Okay. Just going to take this out for a minute. So we have months between. If I wanted, I can just divide by 12. Well, maybe I want to know how many years it's been. So how many years? So I have the same situation here where it's giving me this. Wow, I don't need all that. So now I have this expression, And now I can create parentheses around this expression and pass it to round. Okay? So your SQL may look, you know, a little complicated. And so our first, this is here, this is the inner. See, so this is the inner where you see the blue. Well, this annotation is not very user-friendly, so I'm not going to do that. I can annotate this in the PowerPoint possibly. So here's some good examples where you can, similar to what I just did, hire date plus 60, maybe their benefits kick in after they've been with the company 60 days. So here you can create a report, hire date plus 60, add 60 days to the hire date. Okay. Sys date minus hire date, you want to see the number of weeks, that's different. So it defaults to the number of days, but if you divide by 7, it'll give you how many weeks. So take a look at these examples. I encourage you to go through them. I will keep them in the PowerPoint. All I did was extract some highlights from your hub activity. So if you pass a date, sys date, and we pass it into the function last day, it will give us the last day of the current month. So I want you to do, see what's in red? Let's type that in now into Apex. So last underscore day, and in parentheses, sys date. From data. Okay, October 31st. It's giving us the last day. Take a look. These are the different functions. The months between we looked at. You can add a certain number of months, right? If you want to know what is the date 2 months from when I was hired, you can pass in hire date, like here. Where's the example? Oh, interesting. Here's another example of next day function where you can pass in a date for a field. It could be hire date. And then you can say, give me the date for the Saturday, whatever is the next Saturday after this date. There's a lot of interesting things you can do. And then there's different formats. These I want you to look at carefully. Like if you want to see the format with the number in TH or RD, June 7th, January 3rd, you add a TH, you can format. There's something called to character. We can convert from date format. We need it in date format if we're going to do these calculations, adding months, adding days, the difference between the current date. But if we wanted to display it a certain way, like changing it from the default format to June the 7th with the TH, we can use this toChar function. We pass in the date field, either sys date or hire date, and then in literals, we have to follow this format. Okay. You can do month, day with a comma and the 4-digit year. Right. So take a look at the different formats. Sys date, you can change the way the time looks. I mean, there's so many of them. I'm not even going to go into. There's different. If you're working with dollars, there's different ways of making it appear. Like here, salary. So take a look at this one. Select to character, and you're passing in the salary, and you're going to describe how you want it. Now, when you put the literal of how you want it, make sure you give enough positions. Like if you're in Excel and you have a column and you make the column too small, it will give you an error format to show you that. So let's type in this one. Select, just as you see it here, select to character. You're going to pass in the salary, just as you see it. I want you to do it with one less digit. Let's see if we do it 9,999. Let's see what we get. Okay, so 2 underscore char, parenthesis, salary.
With 17.
There it is. Okay, so 2 character, we're passing in salary, we're giving it a literal, we want the $sign, and then we want the 2 digits, a comma, and then the 3 digits. So we're gonna just see what happens. Salary, comma, here's my literal. I want the $sign, and I'm gonna do 9, comma, 1, 2, 3, 4, and from employees. You see what's happening? Just like in Excel, make the column too small, it's giving you this, like, not exactly an error message, but you don't see your data. So you have to make it bigger. What if I give it an extra digit? Now it's big enough. All right, so if you're not sure, it can't hurt to add an extra 9. Right? And now it shows. And I can combine, in addition to changing it, I can do all kinds of calculations on it as well. Right? The salary field, but if you're doing calculations, you have to do it before you convert it to character. So once you convert it to character, now it's a literal, it's not a numeric. And there's some examples. I encourage you to go through all these. The where clause. Suppose you want to look for everyone who was hired before a certain date. We looked at this in lab 1, where you had a hire date or salary that was between a certain 2 values. Well, you can also do the same type of thing. You can convert a literal into a date. Just like we convert into character, we can convert to a date. So if I have this literal, I want it to act like a date, then I use the to date. Just like we needed 2 character to make it look a certain way.
No.
So, I mean, there's so many functions. It's just a matter of playing with them to get comfortable. But I mean, round months between the date functions, I would especially pay attention to the date functions. Your lab for Sunday, let's do Sunday, has a number of problems that have to do with the date functions because those are really important. You'll probably use those the most, along with the numeric functions. Substring, concatenation, those are important too. Some of the less obscure ones you may not need to use, but you need to be aware that they're there and practice with them. Okay, good. When we get to, normally after we do single row functions, we would go and do multi-row functions. But in this semester, we're doing joins before the aggregate functions. So I just want to give you a taste of what we might use aggregate functions for. Right, so let's start from employees. Let's just run that. All right, so here, employees gives me the names of each person and what their salary is. An aggregate function would give me one output for a group of rows. So if I had select, let's choose a few fields. We don't need all these fields, right? So, all right, so let's just do employee ID, and let's see, salary, and times 1.07. Let's say we're considering giving each employee a raise of 7%. So I can take salary, and because it's a numeric field, I can multiply and figure out what 7% will be if I multiply it by 1.07, and now I can run it. And it's going to run this calculation on each individual row for each employee. It's a single row operation. And if we wanted to, if we were going to round it or do something else with it, it's doing this for each row. Now, what if I want to find out the average or the highest salary for all employees in my company, right? There's a function AVG, I believe it is, for average salary. Okay, so I'm passing in the salary into the average function. This is going to give, this is an aggregate function. It's going to work on all the records for this table. And it's telling me that 8775 is the average for all the employees. And this is known as an aggregate because it took all those records, all those employees, and gave me one result. So another very popular function is max salary and min salary. What's the highest, what's the lowest, and what's the average? And now I can run it. And so I'm getting one result for all my employees. This is an example of an aggregate function, just so you get an idea. The functions that you're doing in your lab will be work on each row individually, one at a time. Does that make sense? Just to give you a taste of what we do when we do the multi-row functions, because how is everybody? I don't see everybody's video. I only see half of you video, so I don't know. Are we confused or sleeping or? How is everyone? All right?
Good.
A few people woke up and their videos are on.
Yeah, this is way better than C++.
Oh, well, C++ is a programming language. It's got to be compiled. This is interpreted at runtime. It's more English-like, right? So
Higher language level.
higher level language, exactly. So isn't this more fun than C++?
Yes.
I don't want to do C++ or Java. That's no fun. This is fun, right?
It is.
It does get more complicated, so you have to know the basics. Also, another thing I can't do is I can't mix aggregates and single row functions together. I can't say, oh, okay, and now I want the manager ID. Okay, notice what happened. You can't mix aggregates and single row. Manager ID is on each. I can't take the average. Well, it's not a numeric field, manager ID, it's character. I can't take the average of that field. It doesn't make sense to take the average manager name, right? So these are functions that are aggregates. This is a single row field. You're going to get this, not a single group function or something to that effect. Make sense? So if I want to know the manager ID, I can ask to see the salary. I can't ask for average salary. I can say salary on my manager ID. Okay, and then I get the manager ID and the salaries of the people that work for that person. Okay, you just can't mix aggregates and single row. Doesn't work. Any questions?